Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be taking a look at Boonlake, designed by Alexander Pfister and published by Capstone Games. Let's go ahead and start off with the review with a quick overview of the game. The point of the game is simple. Get the most victory points, which are tracked on the outside of the board here. On your turn, you're going to be taking one of these action tiles off the board, and you're going to be performing the action listed. So you always go from left to right, and then everybody will get to perform this action. It's a great system that keeps everybody engaged on all players' turns. Now, after you take the action, you'll slot this in on the bottom of this action tracker here, and you'll get to move a number of spaces equal to where you took it. So if I took this action, I'd get to move 3 spaces. You move your boat here, and wherever you land, you get the bonus. Now, if you ever do land over one of these blue areas, you're going to trigger an intermediate scoring, which is going to trigger some additional income and all sorts of other resources that you'll see at the top of the board there. So the gameplay is very straightforward. You'll be taking actions until 4 of these incomes happen. Now, when the income happens, you'll have some income tracks on the side here for cards as well as cash. You'll also have the ability to perform a scoring. At the start of the game, all players are going to have one of these tokens that's on the board, and you're going to be able to do one of these specific scoring things. For example, this one has you putting out specific number of buildings in these specific areas, so that's on the board here. And then you also have cards that are similar to this, where you need to have adjacencies. So there's lots of different ways to do this. Some deal with income. What's really cool is when you are playing the game, you're actually going to be picking one of these out of 2 at the start. Everybody's going to put them on the board, and whoever put that tile down, they actually are going to score double from one of these objectives. You'll put out these tokens every round, and based on the round, that's how many points you're going to be getting. If you fail to succeed at an objective, you're actually going to lose that many points. So you really want to make sure that you're focusing on those objectives. They also provide cards that you can play as you play. Now, cards are a big part of this game. Almost every action has some way to play a specific type of card. So you can either discard them for cash or you can play the cards. And the cards here come in all shapes and sizes. There are cards that have instant effects, there are cards with endgame scoring, and there are cards with continuous effects. So they all have a point value as well at the bottom here, but generally you're going to be wanting to play these cards. So in addition to spending cash on cards, you're also going to need to have on your player board a certain number of resources provided. And this is done through this canoe system. So for example, if I wanted to play this one here, it requires 2 rocks and a blue. You'll have production buildings that just provide a passive resource of that type, but you also have these canoes. And the way it works is you'll actually move the canoes as far down this track as you like. To the right is free. See this little marker here? But if you want to go back to the left, you're going to have to pay $2 to move back to the left. But once you satisfy that condition, you can then go ahead and play that card. So now I have those 2 rocks and that 1 blue. So this is pretty great. It'll let you play your cards in a very interesting way, but you can get those production buildings so you can produce even more resources for these cards. Now, while we're on the player boards here, you also have kind of the core of the game is putting out these buildings and producing income. So as you play, you're going to have all of these different pieces. They'll come onto the board, and you do that by paying these settlers. You can either put settlers straight onto the board here, or you can upgrade those settlers into these small houses, these larger houses, or you can even put cows on the board that'll generate you money as well as points. So there's a lot of interesting placement going on here on the board in particular. And when you put on the board, there will be these little tiles that you can play on, and they'll give you bonuses if you play on them. Some have a cost associated with them, and these costs might give you rewards like extra income or extra money income or card income. And the last crux of the game here is the lever system. So one of the actions allows you to put these levers onto your boards, and they are a renewable resource that you can use once per quarter of the game. So as you activate them, you simply slide them down and you trigger the effect below. If you don't use them, you'll score points, so no harm, no foul. Now these have some really cool effects allowing you to get extra money, reduce resource costs, trade in cards for more people, or allow you to pass on other people's turns to do a special bonus action. There's a lot of cool flexibility in the levers, and I love that you can pick and choose which one you're going to be going for. So that's the core of the game. You're going to be going from round to round, picking those action tiles, moving around the board, and doing your best to score victory points. Now let's go ahead and talk about what I liked in this game. Now, my favorite thing about this game is definitely the cards themselves. I love the variety here, and I love all of the different abilities. One of my favorite things from Alexander Pfister games is how he creates cards that are very unique to the game itself. For example, in Boonlake, levers are a huge thing, so a card that allows you to reuse a lever is pretty awesome. Also, being able to interact with the spaces on the board allows you to generate extra income. So I really like that there's an attention to detail in the variety of cards here, and I love that your strategy can be very flexible. You're often going to be drawing lots of cards during this game, so you can really pick and choose the ones that you actually want to play. Also, the artwork on these cards is really nice and fresh. I love how it looks very hand-drawn here as opposed to something a little bit more digital art, and I really enjoy the whole aesthetic of this game. Everything just looks really well done. Another thing that I really enjoy has to be the lever system. It's a lot of fun getting to choose your personalized special abilities, and I really like the decisions here. You have some that are very straightforward, but these three on the top in particular are very interesting. I love the idea that you're going to be giving up an action to do something special, but I really like how sometimes, especially in the multiplayer game, you're going to get actions you can't even use, so these seem to be way more of a benefit than they would be in maybe a 2-player or lower player count game. I really like the flexibility that these give. The other big positive here is just the amount of bonuses on the board. When you're placing on a tile, you'll have bonuses that you'll get. When you're putting new tiles on the board, you'll be able to get bonuses based on where you land. And then you're automatically getting all sorts of bonuses whenever you play cards, whether it be the ability to get points or extra cards, whether it be incomes or extra points here, just all sorts of passive bonuses. It's just littered with them. And the action system even helps with that as well. I love getting things on every player's turns or opportunities to get things. And then when it's your turn to take an action, you just get to do so much on your turn and everything feels good. This is one of those games where you kind of just want to do everything because everything feels great and it's just so satisfying to put things out on the board. Another thing I really like about this game is the intermittent scoring. You'll have an opportunity to play some of your cards in front of you or upgrade some of your buildings on the board. You'll also have the opportunity to do one of these scorings, and I think this is great as it gives you some form of goal during the game. So I like that you get to choose the order in which you complete these, and some of them are extremely easy to complete based on when you decide to do so. So I like that you have a lot of choice in the paths that you take. I also really like that you're getting rewarded for using levers or not using them, just having them. And then I also really enjoy the income system as a whole. How these cards, you'll be getting more as you play, but as the further you go up, the less cards you get and the more points you get instead. I think that's a really cool system here. Same thing with the income. I love that you're just going to be casually getting more and more bonuses on the track. So there's a lot of good things happening here, and I think the flow of the game is really, really positive here. Another positive I want to talk about is the solo mode. On the back of one of the player boards, you can use any player board. It has a solo mode here, and you're basically going to be setting up the game by putting pieces onto these spaces. The game is going to be using these action tiles, and these tiles are going to dictate which of the actions that the automa uses. It's a really straightforward system, and it makes a lot of sense, and it plays extremely smoothly and extremely fast. Played the solo mode about 4 times now, and it just works very, very cleanly. Big fan of how this works. It also simulates an opponent very well, where they are going to be taking actions based on what you pick as well, but only specific actions because some just aren't going to affect you. I also like that they have this priority system, and just like the other Pfister games, the difficulty is modular, so you can pick and choose how difficult you want the bot to be based on its generation of points. I really like this system, especially with how it's building and how it uses this location selector with the actual back of the tiles here. So the solo is a really nice feature here. Let's quickly talk about the things that I didn't like about the game. Now, the first thing I want to talk about are the costs of the cards. So as you play the game, you're going to be noticing that you require certain costs for the resources. Now, every time I've played this game, I have never really worried about the resource production. There are lots of ways to get production buildings by putting tiles on the board, and if you look at your hand of cards, you can kind of easily make a chain of cards here where you are not going to need to ever really push back your canoe. This has always seemed to be something that I thought would be a bigger deal, but I honestly have gotten this lever many times and just never have used it. This is a special lever that you can use to make it so it only costs you, it's free to move your canoe back, but it just never ends up getting used. It always seems that you have the resources you need, and it's not something you really need to worry that much about, which is a shame because I think it's a cool system, and it sounds like it'd be a very interesting choice of having to go left and right and when to push forward, but it seems that as you play the game, you're just going to have way more resources than you actually need. And that's even true when it comes to these big cards down here, where you're going to have this large amount. Really, the tightest resource in this game is actually the money that you'll be needing to pay for these cards. So it's pretty tight at the beginning of the game, your money, but the more cards you play and the more things go, you'll be generating a lot of income. So the resources in the game really never felt like something that I was worried about or worried about managing, which is unfortunate. The last criticism I have with the game is actually a specific small resource. This is a very small nitpick, and this is the Vase Resource. The Vase is a resource that you'll get by visiting certain spaces or playing specific action cards or by upgrading certain levers, and certain cards will require that you have maybe a vase to play them. Now, the Vase just seems like a very niche, random resource that honestly feels like it's just there sometimes, and it feels like a resource you can ignore at certain points. It always felt like I had a vase and I never was trying to get one, but I just happened to have one. So it's a very minor nitpick, as it's a resource that makes sense. There needs to be something there that is a little bit harder to get, and that's like a physical thing that you can pick up. But for me, the vase just seemed kind of out of place. It didn't really work with the rest of the resource system here. Now, that being said, those are really all of the criticisms that I had with the game. I rate this game a 9 out of 10. I think it's pretty dang impressive. The action system here, I think, is the most fun part of the entire system. I love how you're able to pick these and you're able to do the actions, and it really feels good to be engaged on every player's turn. And I love that all of these action tiles are basically going to make you feel like you're doing something amazing. It's really satisfying to resolve them, and it's really satisfying to follow as well. And one last thing before we wrap up this review, one thing I really appreciate in this game is the fact that when you are upgrading your board, you put out your small one first, it becomes your medium-sized one, but unlike other games like Terra Mystica, when you remove one of these pieces, it's off your board forever, so you get to keep all of the income you uncover, and it feels really, really good to just be generating lots and lots of points. So I really like this system, and I love how simple the upgrades work here. So my final thoughts here, a very solid engine building game with lots of fun cards, with some really great systems employed that's going to keep you excited and engaged on every turn, feeling good about generating resources and performing strong actions. This is one that I'm going to find myself playing a lot, whether it be with others so that I can use all of these actions in interesting and fun ways, or in a solo capacity. Fantastic game, that is Boonlake. And those are my thoughts on Boonlake. What did you think of the review? Does this game look like something that you'd be interested in taking on yourself? I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.